Can you remember the first time you heard the phrase, the land of milk and honey? And what that might have evoked emotionally or visually in your mind? Perhaps of a grand oasis, or maybe a miniature Garden of Eden? And if it did, that's understandable, but still wouldn't be very accurate to the contextual reality of what those two words mean in the situation of Israel. So let's take a look at what this means here. This reference, this hyperbolic reference to two things, an abundance of milk and abundance of honey. And to start to fill out our contextual understanding of both of those, let's explore this land visually as Abram would have first done when he entered this land coming north-south from Damascus and entered the northern part of the country in the Hula Valley, which we see before us here. This is a lush valley with very fertile soil, with an abundance of rain, at least 25 inches of rainfall per year. And the crop growing is excellent because of the metallic nature of the soil and its high heat content. You can get multiple crops in the same growing season here. And this is a very good place to live in this northern part of the country. Now there's another aspect of the north here that goes with this color green, and that is to realize where the major trade routes are in Israel. And the biggest one, called the Way of the Sea, the Via Maris, the International Highway, which comes south out of Damascus, right down through the Hula Valley here, skirts, as we see on our map here, the Sea of Galilee, goes past the Horns of Hittim and the Arbel Cliffs, past Mount Tabor, across the Jezreel Valley, through Megiddo Pass, where the red dot is on your map, continues on down to the sea, down to Egypt. This is the International Highway. It's also the Temptation Turnpike. This is where new ideas about how to amuse yourself enter this land. This is where new ideas about worshiping other gods enters this land and raises the possibility of syncretism. And when the land is good and the water is abundant and regular, you do have some time on your hands to think other thoughts, and they are brought into this land by the International Highway, which we'll call the Temptation Turnpike. Now, from a physical geography perspective, this Temptation Turnpike cuts right through the heart and soul of the northern part of the country, where the big red circle is up at the top of your graphic. But you notice the south, the Judea area in green here, is completely shielded from the International Highway. This reality is going to factor into our thinking as part of the implications of the land of milk and honey. And so as we leave the north here, let's remember our profile. We have more than adequate rainfall, and it's dependable rainfall. We have very fertile soil, good growing seasons, and by the way, we're bisected by the International Highway. If we go 60 miles further south, the topography changes radically. Now we're into steep hills and valley of the hill country of Samaria. Rocks are abundant everywhere. And green is the color you see much less of, and gray, white rock you see in abundance. Because of the steep sloping sides of valleys and hills, you can't grow grains here. You don't ever have enough flat ground. And so what farming you're going to do, what agriculture you're going to pursue, is always going to be in terraced, sloped arrangements, as you see here, to grow your figs, to grow your olives, and to grow your grapes. So freeze that thought. Central part of the country, gray for rocks. Now we're going to go another 70 miles further south to Beersheba in the northern Negev part of this country. And we leave the central region behind with its adequate rainfall, its steep slopes and valleys and terraced agriculture, and we see a whole new color here. Talk about diversity in this land. We've only gone a grand total of about 150 miles. And yet we've gone from green to gray to now tan, sandy tan. Why is it sandy tan? Because we don't even get 10 inches of rainfall per average year here. You need at least 16 inches to grow grain. So there are no grain growing possibilities here. There are no cows and horses down here to speak of. The ideal animal for this part of the country happens to be the goat. Because goats can live in an environment where there's only 8 to 10 inches per year. They can live where there are only weeds and seasonal grasses, not grain crops. They are the ideal animal for the South. They're rugged, they're durable, they can go long distances without watering. They're very sturdy-footed. And yet, in the midst of all this, they'll eat almost anything, including the roots of dead weeds. And in the midst of that, they produce 40% more volume of milk than a sheep does, with 35% higher butterfat content, which makes for yogurts and cheeses, which are absolutely ideal for a migratory people. And so when we hear the word milk, we should associate not cow's milk, but goat's milk, the ideal animal in the southern part of this country. Now, honey, you immediately think of bees, and that would be true. But some of the sources of antiquity would suggest that it comes from the date palm trees, where when you take the dates and you mash them up and you let them ferment for a while, they become sort of a highly viscous, flowing, syrupy kind of fluid, which was termed honey. And so there's our north and south. There's our symbols of milk and honey, the goat and the date palm. And as we've said before, this great goat herd here is the ideal animal for migratory people who live in the South. And so here is some of the contrast contained in this phrase, the land of milk and honey. It's the land of green and tan. It's the land of goats and date palms. It's the land of shepherds and farmers. It's the land of the North, and it's the land of the South. And I want to add a new thought here. It's the land of compromisers and God-fearers. Now let's explore this last dynamic and link it to the land of milk and honey. Here's my thesis. See if you agree. The nature and character of the land in which we live tends to shape the spiritual destiny of the people who live in it. Let's test that hypothesis. Consider the divided kingdom period. Of the 19 or perhaps 20 monarchs, depending on how you dare to count them, of the north, none of them bent the knee toward Yahweh for any significant portion of their reign. They all were apostate. Down in the south, 11 of the 19 monarchs, the Hezekiahs, spent a considerable portion of their reign bowing their knee in dependence and dependence upon Yahweh. Now, from what we've just seen of the land of milk and honey, can you see why the nature and character of the land tends to shape the spiritual destiny of the people who live in it? If you live in the north, who needs God? You can take care of yourself. You can provide for yourself. Plus, you've got time on your hands to be seduced by what's coming through the temptation turnpike, the international highway. In the south, you better live close to Yahweh, because you are but 90 days removed from a significant drought or a significant insect infestation, and that is a disaster. The nature and character of the land tends to shape the character of the spiritual destiny of the people who live in it. It's true. Now, you want a challenge? Think with me on this. Economically speaking, those of you who come from all over the United States, what color best epitomizes the economy from whence you cometh? And the answer has to be, all things considered, green. We live in a land of abundance. It is so easy to take care of oneself and to provide oneself and to seduce oneself into thinking that that is easy to do. But if you live in the South, your issues are very different. Total sustenance and total dependence. So what's the spiritual challenge that comes with this phrase, the land of milk and honey? Here it is. We need to live each day, even though we are actually physically in the green, we need to live each day as if we are spiritually and emotionally in the tan. That even though it seems as if we can provide for ourselves, yet spiritually, emotionally, mentally, we have to embrace the posture that no, we can't. We are still totally dependent and totally needing to be sustained by our Father in heaven, the Good Shepherd. So the land of milk and honey, a fascinating little phrase, loaded with contextual insights, comes with a very substantial spiritual challenge. It's a phrase that comes to us every day. How are we going to live? In the green or in the tan? And much gets shaped by how we respond to that daily challenge.